Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be talking about water erosion. But before we get talking about water erosion, we first have to kind of review and go over what erosion is just as a whole. So erosion is the movement of particles that have been weathered. Now in previous videos, we talked about how weathering is the breaking down uh, of our surface of the earth through those three agents of wind, water, and ice. And erosion can occur through these three big factors as well of water, wind, and ice moving these particles. And erosion can be gradual, so it can be slow, or it can be sudden. So just as those three factors, water, wind, and ice, break down or weather parts of the earth, now the second part is erosion. So after those particles have been broken down into smaller, finer sediments, now they are easier to be moved through these things such as water, wind, and ice. So, what is water erosion, or how does water erosion work? So, water can gradually erode small sediments and carry them downstreams. So, imagine it as you see here on this picture on the left. If we combine these kind of elements we've been talking about, if we had, for example, a flowing river right here, we can imagine that this river, as it flows, begins to break down and smooth out rocks. And as they become finer and finer sediments, the walls of the riverbed begin to expand, and eventually all these smaller pieces that the water is breaking down begin to move downstream. So these processes of weathering and erosion go hand in hand. They work together. They work in tandem. And so as they begin to kind of break down over time, what happens is eventually these small riverbeds or gullies can eventually form into large canyons here, as we see on the right. Now, we talk about things like the Grand Canyon in the United States. The Grand Canyon and other canyons throughout the world are formed through these tandem processes of weathering, erosion, and deposition. So these small sediments are being broken down through weathering, and then as they are being broken down, the water can carry them downstream. So again, erosion is that movement of these smaller pieces of earth or sediments that are more easily able to be moved now that they are smaller due to weathering. And so this is gradual weathering. But we also talked about how erosion and weathering can happen suddenly. So what does sudden water erosion look like? And sudden water erosion sometimes is a little bit less predictable because mudslides and avalanches are usually caused by rain that can cause massive sudden erosions that can be damaging and life-threatening. Now, if we look at this picture here on the left, this is a picture of a city, if I remember correctly, in Japan that was a smaller town that through heavy rain and mudslides were able to kind of cause the death of a couple of their citizens and also a lot of property damage. And mudslides are really common where you have people next to tops of mountain slopes or hills where it's easy for that mud to slide down. We know that we played with mud. If we played with kind of mud before and it gets all wet, it's easy to kind of go down And so as this soil and all these other sediments get wet and turns into mud, it's really easy to be able to slide down large slopes, just like we have with avalanches. So avalanches, we see this picture on the right, is another form of sudden water erosion. And this is able to, just similar to mudslides, just very in a colder kind of environment. With falling of snow, with falling of different increasing weight onto different parts of the mountain, it can eventually begin to avalanche. Now, there are plenty of causes of avalanches that can happen. And I'm not saying that water erosion is the only cause for an avalanche, but one of the causes of an avalanche can be through water erosion. And the last bit of water erosion I want to talk about, is lakes and ocean waves. So this is something that unfortunately happens, that when we have cliffs and other surfaces next to lakes and oceans, if we imagine here, right, that we have waves that are coming up and hitting these cliffs and surfaces of the wall, just like we talked about with water weathering, where it can form those sea arches, here it can slowly begin to break down the surface of the cliff, and erosion is carrying away those sediments. And so this is a cause we see sometimes in the news and other places, where people want to build these homes on these beautiful cliffs of lakes and oceans, and eventually the cliff, as we can see right here, begins to, through the process of weathering, erosion, and then later deposition, which we'll talk about, that the foundation that it was originally built on begins to disappear right beneath them. And these homes can eventually and will eventually fall into the lake or the ocean or whatever body of water is near them. And so this can be another dangerous example of gradual water erosion over time. So in summary, erosion is a process that carries it's the movement of particles or sediments that have been weathered or broken down. And weathering, erosion are two processes of a change to land that work in tandem to shape the surface of our Earth over time. Erosion can be occurred through things such as water, wind, and ice, and water erosion can occur through things such as forming forming canyons, having sudden water erosion through mudslides and avalanches, or even causing the gradual erosion or movement of these sediments of cliff sides near lakes and oceans over time. So I hope this helps. I can't wait to see y'all in the next video. Bye, everyone.